So one of the reasons I wanted you, there were lots of reasons I wanted you on the podcast, but this essay that you wrote about having hope, I thought rang true to me. And the reason it rings true is because it seems like in the culture these days, if you look everywhere, um, there doesn't seem to be a lot of that. And it's funny, in our culture, and sometimes I wonder, I think Americans have always been viewed as a hopeful people, and maybe that's not the word that we needed to describe it. I think we've maybe been more optimistic, but there is a sense of almost despair in our culture that I see everywhere. And what was interesting about your essay is that you were sensing that too. And you were kind of writing this to kind of, I won't say therapy, but in some ways to kind of write out what you were trying to believe, even though you weren't feeling it. So I kind of wanted to get at what led you to write this. Well, let's just start there. What led you to write what you were feeling? What was the situation that made you feel despairing?
Yeah. Well, I've been writing a kind of pseudo series. I mean, it is a series I've been writing through the traditional virtues. You have temperance and prudence and justice and fortitude and faith, hope, and love. So I got to hope. So first of all, I needed to cover hope. I need to talk about hope. But yeah, 1000% in our culture, there just isn't a lot of that. And I consider myself like a hopeful person. I'm on Team Hope, but mostly positive. But then there are just these areas in my life where hope hasn't reached. And I can sympathize, empathize with a lot of my generation. I'm legally Gen Z. I'm legally a youngin'. And my people, though my age and younger, are just not hopeful. You see studies like, we're not having kids because I don't know what I'm going to raise my kids. I don't know what kind of world it's going to be in. I talked to high schoolers today, which I don't even know if they're technically Gen Z, whatever generation they're in. I talk to them and I hear them say, "Oh yeah, I don't have a hope of ever buying a house. I don't expect getting a good job. I don't expect I'll be accepted into college." And all these things that are supposed to be kind of like metrics of the American dream, they don't have that dream. They have no hope that any of that's going to happen. And so it's rampant. It's out there. And I want to be a person of hope. I think that is something that Christians are supposed to be. And so I write to instill some hope in a hopeless world and instill some hope in the few areas of my life where that hope hasn't really caught on, hasn't really captured me.
It's interesting. I just interviewed Griffin Goosh, and who is also Gen Z, and we're talking about having children. And so it's interesting you just brought that up, and why a lot of people in that in your generation kind of feel like, well, that's never happening, and that does seem like this sort of rather persistent feeling in the culture. Why do you think that sense of despair is so prevalent? I mean, what do you think is happening in the culture that is making people feel that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to blame a little bit of it on just kind of media in general. Not just news, but also not just social media. There is a way in which what is publicized is the bad stuff. The thing is, that's not necessarily new. Newspapers, 50 years ago covered the bad stuff mostly. And yeah, every once in a while a cat was saved from a tree. But mostly it's the bad stuff. But there's just a prevalence of it, and it's in your feet. It's in your face. Our phones, 6 inches from our eyeballs, and we just see negative thing. Or we see, somebody posing with their Lamborghini, and like, I I don't have a Lamborghini. I don't have that. So even when you see the good stuff, you start to realize, but that's not my existence. That's not where I'm at. So a lot of it is that what we're being fed constantly. But then I think there's a cultural movement that in its essence is good, but all things that maybe have a root of good can be misused. And that is that we are just more honest about things. You'll find a lot of younger people, but people of all ages being like, oh yeah, I got depression, I got ADHD, I got anxiety. There's like an openness about that. And there's a healthy aspect to that we haven't stigmatized that. But then this leads us into areas where we're just more open and honest about like things aren't good. Politics has always been nasty, but we're now more talking about how it's nasty, and there's definitely some truth in which case it's gotten worse with certain political figures and things, and so it just seems like a lot of the systems of the world are just bad. Politics is one of the best examples of that. Like, if you're in the United States and you feel like the government is not working in your interest whatsoever, whether that's because of your socioeconomic status, the color of your skin, your sexual orientation, like, you're going to have a hard time having hope if this huge, giant political machine doesn't really want you around, doesn't want you to express yourself or something like that. So, 100% you're going to feel some despair because of that. And like specifically with the children thing, I also hear people talk about like climate change specifically, like, will the future have the resources? Because we see the studies, we see that it doesn't look good. So will there be resources in the future? And hope has to do with looking towards the future. And right now, the people calculating, different scenarios in the future, a lot of those aren't good. And there's like the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists who has their doomsday clock, like, ooh, that thing's getting a little close to what is it, midnight, I think, like it's closer to these apocalyptic scenarios. And so we see that, and I'm not going to say anybody's wrong for feeling something when there are some really big machines and systems in the world that don't seem to promise us some good things in the next years. Yeah.
So one of the things, though, that has been in the past when people feel unsure about things, uncertain about the future, has been religion or faith. Mm-hmm. And one of the other interesting things that I've noticed, and I think other people have noticed about younger generations, is that they are less religious than older generations. And so that you don't see people kind of relying on faith to kind of get them through times. And, you kind of talked about earlier about people, especially, whether it's sexual orientation or persons of color, and especially I'm looking more on for persons of color that, in the past when things were really rough, the church was considered a strong institution to kind of help people. But that isn't the case, it seems, with younger generations. Why do you think that they aren't running to, or at least relying on those as sources of hope in that, as opposed to older generations in the past?
Yeah, I think there's potentially a two-part answer, and the first thing is just that there's been some spotlights on the cracks. Mm-hmm. And there are problems with Christian institutions. There are problems, plain as day, with a wide variety across all denominations, across outside of the Christian religion. There are problems, and we've seen those, and we have, and some of that has been exposed, and it's ugly, and it's something that moves people away. I mentioned, like, at the top of the show, like, I thought the big problem with faith was, like, evolution or something like that. That's why everybody was leaving the church. No, when I talk to people, and I've been in college ministry, I work with a lot of young people on a weekly basis, monthly basis, and the thing that scares people away is, but it's so harmful. It's like the church doesn't feel like it is a safe place to be that refuge, because there are examples of clergy sexual abuse, abuse of all kinds. There are examples of people taking advantage of others and taking their money and flying their 2 private jets around. Like, there is that. And so does it seem like it is a refuge, because some of those problems existed in the past, but there wasn't a spotlight on them. We didn't know about them. We should have known about them, to be clear. The answer isn't cover that up. But there's this awareness of, oh, this isn't like great. And so then I think the other side is just institutions in general are not something trusted anymore. And there's, again, reasons for this. It's one, institutions fail. There was a long time in our human history where, like, big institutions, churches, government, that was your life, and you just sat down and shut up, and you just kind of had to go along with them. And we now have voices against those things. And again, there's an element of that's good, but there's a widespread notion that institutions are bad, that authority itself is problematic. And I think, in a way, like, God calls us 100% to a different kind of authority. We should wield power differently. Like, there is a problem with how power is being wielded, but in general, people just aren't on board with institutions, because it's not just the church; it's the judicial system. It's the government. It's all. I think, like, all 3 branches of the government. Like, people do not trust them at all. Doesn't even matter what party's in there. And so people just don't trust big things anymore, because we see a pattern of the big institutions can be bad, which is correct. And so we throw them all out. We throw them all out. And that includes the church. Why should the church tell me what to do when I kind of have my insides tell me to go this way or that kind of thing?